Welcome back. Today we'll be looking at the theory of consumer behavior. How this topic seeks to do is to help us understand why the demand curve is downward sloping. That is, why is it that when the price of a commodity goes high, consumers tend to buy less, and vice versa. In this topic, at the end of the lesson, you should be able to recognize the fact that the goal of a consumer is to maximize utility, not just to derive utility, but to maximize utility. That is the goal of the consumer. So when you go to the market and you are buying goods, your aim is to get the highest possible satisfaction from the expenditure you are making. There are two ways by which this utility can be measured. So we'll see how we can derive the demand curve under the cardinalist school of thought, and how you can do the same thing, and how you can derive the demand curve under the ordinary school of thought. So these are the two main goals of this course. The theory of the theory of consumer behavior, as I've said earlier, is to explain why the quantity demanded of a good is inversely related to the price of the commodity, other things being equal. Basically, when we go to the market to buy a commodity, we do so with the hope that we'll consume the commodity and derive some satisfaction from it. The satisfaction we derive from consuming a commodity is known as utility. So in economics, when we talk of utility, we are referring to the satisfaction you derive from consuming a commodity. So suppose you consume 3 balls of kinky. The total satisfaction derived from consuming these 3 balls of kinky is known as total utility. So, in an attempt to understand the behavior of the consumer, our focus is to understand this concept of utility. So, the question is, how do we measure utility? There are two schools of thought as to how utility could be measured. That is, the satisfaction we derive from consuming goods. How can we measure it? So one school of thought is the cardinal school of thought, and the other one is the ordinalist school of thoughts. So we'll start off by looking at the cardinal school of thoughts or cardinalist school of thoughts. The cardinalist school of thought believes that utility can be measured using cardinal numbers. So numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3 can be used to measure the satisfaction you derive from consumer goods. Uh, some have argued that we can use the price we pay for goods as a way of measuring the satisfaction we derive from commodities. So, for instance, if I go to the market and I buy a good and I'm ready to pay 100 cedis, the amount I'm paying to an extent measures the satisfaction I expect to derive from consuming that commodity. So, one school of thought, and the cardinalist school of thought, is that under certain conditions, we can measure utility using monetary units. That is the price the consumer is prepared to pay for a unit of a commodity. There are others who also suggest that we could use a unit to measure a utility called utils. This particular suggestion, the second suggestion, is subjective, so we will not pursue that angle. So our focus is to see how we can measure utility using the price that you are ready to pay as consumers for the commodity. For us to uh, analyze why more of a commodity is consumed as the price falls using the cardinal school of thought, we need to make certain assumptions that the certain conditions must hold for this theory to hold in practice. So some of the assumptions we are going to, the first one we'll consider is the assumption of rationality. Uh, it is assumed that every consumer aims at utility maximization. That is, anytime you want to buy a good, you are aiming at getting the highest possible satisfaction from consuming that commodity. So you always, as a rational consumer, you always prefer more to less because that is the the aim of the consumer to maximize utility. The second one assumption is constant marginal utility of money. Uh, what this assumption is saying is that the additional satisfaction we get from extra unit of money should be constant. Meaning if somebody gives you 1,000 Ghana cedis, then another person also gives you 1,000, then the third person gives you another 1,000. The satisfaction you derive from the third person giving you 1,000 should be the same as the one the second person is giving you. You shouldn't your satisfaction you derive from getting extra money shouldn't increase or decrease. It should be constant. So it's an assumption. Then the next one is diminishing marginal utility. Diminishing marginal utility simply means that as we increase the consumption of a commodity, the additional satisfaction we derive from consuming the commodity diminishes with time. It reduces. For instance, if you go and buy a ball of kinky, the satisfaction you derive from consuming the first ball of kinky is not the same as the satisfaction you get if you take an extra ball of kinky. The extra ball of kinky you take the extra satisfaction you derive will be lower than the first one. But if you take the third kinky, the additional satisfaction you derive from the third kinky will be smaller than the second one. So we expect that as you increase your consumption of good, the additional satisfaction you derive from increasing your consumption will decrease as total consumption increases. Then the last one is that utility should be measurable. And in this case, we are using the price the consumer is ready to pay as a measure of utility. So let's consider this table here. The first column look at the quantity of goods of a particular good consumed. Then column 2 looks at total utility derived. Then the third column looks at the marginal utility. If the consumer consumes only 1 unit of the commodity, the total utility he derives is 15. When he increases his consumption from 1 to 2, the total utility he gets is 27. When he consumes 1, he gets 15. When he consumes 2, he gets 27. This should tell us that the additional consumption gives the consumer a utility of 12, and that is what we are calling the marginal utility. So as you move the consumption from 1 to 2, you increase your total utility from 15 to 27, and the additional satisfaction you get from the second unit consumed is 12, and that is the marginal utility. So as you increase it to 3, the total utility will increase to 37, and the additional satisfaction you get when you move from consuming 2 to 3 is 10. This is the 10 the measure of the satisfaction is 10. So let's say 10 utils or whatever. So the process continues until we reach 7. If you move from 6 to 7, you realize the total utility increases from 56 to 57, meaning the marginal utility is just 1. As you move from consuming 7 to 8, the total utility actually decreases from 57 to 55, meaning there is a disutility. Utility has actually decreased, so we call it a disutility. So the marginal utility will be negative. So what it means is that if you consume to a certain point, you get the highest satisfaction, but beyond that point, the satisfaction begins to decrease. Is that like overfeeding yourself? If you overfeed yourself, the extra quantities you'll be taking will be giving you discomfort rather than satisfaction. Now we can plot a graph of quantity consumed against total utility and the quantity consumed against marginal utility. When we plot that graph, theoretically this is how it will look. When so this is a function that increases at a decreasing rate. So you can see that the function is increasing at a decreasing rate until it reaches its maximum. When the function is at its maximum, then marginal utility is also 0. When the total utility begins to decrease, then marginal utility assumes a negative value. So the marginal utility is just the slope of the total utility function, and you can see that the slope is always decreasing as you move from left to right. The slope is becoming flatter and flatter as you move to the left. So the marginal utility diminishes as you consume more. The marginal utility can be obtained by using the formula mu Tu2 minus Tu1 over Q2 minus Q1, where we define the Q1, Q2, Tu2, Tu1. This is just similar to the calculation of a portion of the calculation of elasticity, or in simple terms, when you are calculating slope of any function, slope like the normal the usual way we calculate slope of a line, we say y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It's the same logic because we are measuring a rate of change, so it is the slope. We now go to how the demand curve is derived. The demand curve is derived using the utility maximization condition. So we establish an equilibrium situation. Then we'll see what happens when the price of the commodity changes, and so that we can see whether the consumer will increase his consumption or decrease his consumption using the equilibrium condition. When the consumer is consuming only one commodity, then the price the consumer is ready to pay, say the price the consumer is ready to pay for commodity X, is equal to the marginal utility he derives from consuming that commodity X. So the price of commodity X is equal to the marginal utility derived from consuming commodity X. So this is the case for one commodity. If the commodities are two, Then we have the situation where marginal utility of commodity X divided by the price of commodity X will be equal to the marginal utility of commodity Y divided by the price of commodity Y. This is very simple. This equilibrium condition for two commodities is very simple. The issue is that if you take in the first instance we say price of X is equal to marginal utility of X. We can also say that price of commodity Y is equal to the marginal utility of commodity Y. Now, if you divide marginal utility of commodity X by the price of commodity X, you have 1. If you just take the first equilibrium and divide through by price of X, it will be 1. So 1 will be equal to marginal utility of X over price of X. And the same will hold for commodity Y. So marginal utility of commodity Y over the price of commodity Y will be equal to 1. And since 1 is equal to marginal utility of X over price of X, which is also equal to marginal utility of commodity Y over price of commodity Y, then we can say that marginal utility of commodity X over price of X is equal to marginal utility of commodity Y over price of commodity Y. For n commodities, marginal utility of commodity X divided by the price of commodity X will be equal to marginal utility of commodity Y over price of Y, and this will be equal to all the way to marginal utility of commodity N divided by the price of commodity N. So for us to derive the demand curve, we'll use the uh, first equilibrium. You can use both, one in the case of only one commodity or in the case of two commodities, they will produce the same result. But for simplicity, we'll use the case where only one commodity is involved. So let's look at it. So supposing the price of commodity X is equal to marginal utility of commodity X is the initial equilibrium. Assuming that the price of the commodity has gone up, what it means is that the left side of this equilibrium condition has gone up. So the equilibrium is disturbed. So that is what we have now, that price P prime X is greater than marginal utility of X. So P prime X is greater than marginal utility of commodity X. Now, the left side is greater than the right hand side. So for equilibrium to be restored, the right hand side must also increase. It's like saying that 5 is equal to 5. But now the left side has increased to 7. So 7 is now greater than what? 5. So we have to do something to increase the right hand side so that both sides will be equal. What we can do to increase the right hand side is to lower the quantity of commodity X we consume, because we said that there is diminishing marginal utility. That is, as you increase the consumption of a commodity, the marginal utility tends to what? Decrease. Therefore, if you want to increase the marginal utility, what you do is to reduce the consumption. Yeah, as you can look at the table here, the table back here, as you reduce the consumption of the commodity from, let's say, a 6 to 5, you see that the marginal utility has moved from 4 to 7. From 5 to 4, the marginal utility has increased from 7 to 8. From 4 to 3, the marginal utility has increased from 8 to 10. And from 3 to 2, the marginal utility has increased from 10 to 12. So if you want to increase marginal utility, what you do is to reduce the consumption of the item. So you can see that when the price is disturbed and it goes up, the left hand side of the equation of the inequality is greater than what? The right hand side. And for us to restore equilibrium, the right hand side must also increase. But how would that increase? The right hand side can increase only when the consumption of commodity X decreases. It is then that the marginal utility can increase to restore equilibrium. So you can see that when the price of the commodity increases, the logical thing to restore equilibrium is that the quantity consumed must decrease. So the higher the price, the lower the quantity consumed. So that this equilibrium condition, price of X must be equal to marginal utility, should be maintained, because that is what the consumer always try to maintain. How much I'm paying for a good should be equal to the satisfaction I'm deriving from paying for that good. So this is what proves that as the price of the commodity goes high, the quantity consumed has to decrease because of the diminishing marginal utility that is associated with consumption. So we have this law called the law of diminishing marginal utility. This simply says that as more and more units of a commodity is consumed, the additional satisfaction derived from consuming an extra unit diminishes. So this is what we represent in the diagram here. Px is being consumed at x naught, and when the price is Px and x naught quantity is consumed, the equilibrium condition is that Px is equal to marginal utility of x. When the price goes up to Px prime, then quantity demanded decreases from x0 to x1, and for the equilibrium to be restored, P prime x should be equal to marginal utility prime x. So that is the new equilibrium. So you can see that as price of the commodity goes up, the quantity that must be consumed should decrease in order for the consumer to restore the initial equilibrium. So when x1 is consumed, there is an equilibrium situation. When x0 is consumed, there is an equilibrium situation. So the consumer is always at equilibrium by maximizing utility. Anytime the consumer is in equilibrium, he is maximizing utility. And the utility is maximized when the price you are paying is equal to the marginal utility you are deriving from consuming the commodity. I think this should bring us to the end of the ordinary school of thought as to why more of a commodity is consumed as the price falls, or why less of a commodity is consumed as the price of the commodity goes up. We'll look at the ordinary school of thought in the second video. Thank you very much.